Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today or tonight, depending where you are. I'm joined today by Dayna Abraham, um, best-selling author, among many other things that she'll tell you about. And just a little intro about the Autistic Girls Network, in case you don't know us. We are a very small charity and quite new charity supporting autistic girls and women and their families and campaigning for earlier diagnosis for autistic and ADHD, let's face it, girls and women. Okay, so without further ado, I will hand over to Dayna, and then we are just gonna talk through some things. I have some questions for her. Then at the end, we will take questions from the audience, and we will definitely be finished up by 9 at the latest. So if you've got things to do, because it's still a lovely evening here if you're in the UK, isn't it? Well, I suppose that's not true. You might be somewhere else where it's not all that nice, but where I am, it's a lovely evening. So if you've got things that are very exciting that you want to go off and do, you still have time to do them. Okay, so Dayna, let's hear a little bit about yourself.
All right. So I am Dayna Abraham. I'm the founder of Calm the Chaos. And that entails a book, course, membership, a podcast, social channels, all the things at this point, but it didn't start out that way. I am a parent and a neurodivergent adult myself. I have 3 kids, 18, 16, and 10, but they all level up over the summer and I will no longer remember their ages. And so that happens very, very soon. I started out as an educator. I like to say I was born into chaos and then I was raised through chaos. And so when I became an educator, I really gravitated towards the kids who struggled the most and who had paper trails behind them or who were talked about in the teacher's lounge and other teachers didn't understand them. And those kids came into the class and they hung their head. They knew that they were the ones that everybody looked at differently. And I only taught preschool. So I knew that there was really a lot out there that needed a lot of information that needed to be shared and a lot of changes that needed to happen. And I thought that I was going to do that in the school setting for the rest of my career. And then I became a parent and I thought I was going to be the world's best parent. And I thought somebody was going to come to my front door with like balloons and like a parade and like all these things. And they were going to be like, you win. You are the world's best parent. That did not happen, unfortunately. In preschool, my son was kicked out within like the first 3 weeks of school. With kindergarten, I was always asked to stay after school to talk about my son's behavior. In first grade, he was starting to get sent home during the day. And then by second grade, he was suspended more days than he was actually in school. By the time that he was in second, or by that time, I was pregnant with my final child and I was 9 months pregnant, got a call from school. I talk about this in the book, but I got a call from school. They said, you need to come. He's had another meltdown. My son at this point had no diagnoses, despite me trying to get diagnoses and support. He was highly verbal, high IQ, passed all of the standardized testing type stuff. And so it was just passed off as he knew better and he should do better and I should do better. And so that day when I went into the school had everyone lined up, even the police, and they marched me into the office and the principal said to me, you have 2 options. You can let this police officer take your son home, or you can let this police officer take your son into custody, or you can take your son home. Don't bring him back till you know what's wrong with him. And it was in that moment that I knew we had to do something different. No matter what, services we got for him, what diagnosis, what IEPs we got for him, it's still the school just wasn't a place that he fit into. So brought him home, quit my job, started homeschooling, started a blog all in the same time. And that was 10 years ago. And today he is 18, has graduated. He is diagnosed autistic, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, anxiety. Those are the ones that are like on the like official diagnoses. And he started out with, and the wrong diagnosis of DMDD for quite some time.
Do you want to explain what that stands for? Because
So
it's not so
DMDD,
common here.
yeah, okay. So DMDD is, in short, like dysregulated mood disorder. So it is basically when you get dysregulated, you have these big explosive tantrums or meltdowns, and they come out of nowhere and they're unexplainable. And it's like, that sure sounds a lot like an autistic meltdown to me. But because he was so verbal, because he could tell you what he should do in certain situations, because he had eye contact, because of all of these like myths, 10 years ago, he didn't get a diagnosis of autism until he was 11 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, 13 and 18 here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, not uncommon, sadly.
No, yeah, yeah. And then my
Okay.
daughter, I don't know that we'll see. I hope that she'll get the diagnosis if she needs one. But I would not doubt that she's autistic. So we've now brought her home as well. 'Cause she was masking in school. And so the anxiety was sky high. She was hiding a lot of things. Her sensory system was just completely overwhelmed and shut down. And so she couldn't really do anything other than go to school and like be there or like be around in the evening. She couldn't do both. And so it
Mhm.
was really hard for her to manage her days. And now that she's been home for a year and we've kind of unschooled and kind of like dropped a lot of demands, she is starting to come back into her own shell and she started creating a business and all this. And she's only 10. So it's really cool to see her blossom as when
Yeah.
we lean into who she is.
Hmm. And well, I don't know what it's like there, but there is a big uh trend is not the right word. I can't think of another word at the moment, of emotionally based school avoidance, or there are various different names for it. But it is really growing here, because our school system is so rigid, you might say.
Mhm.
And I don't know what it's like there. Are you
It's
having
very
the same
similar. Yeah,
issues? Yeah.
same. I mean, the amount of absences and the amount of tardies and kids not going to school has skyrocketed, especially after the pandemic. I like to think that during the pandemic, we really had an opportunity to change the education system, because some kids really showed like, hey, I actually operate better when I'm not surrounded by 30 kids in a classroom. And I'm not dealing with the fluorescent lights and I'm not dealing with the shuffle of moving from class to class and all the extra things that go into being in a school setting. And we didn't really change much. And so, and then we didn't address the social emotional piece that was under the surface either after going through collectively going through a pandemic. But I also don't blame the teachers. I don't blame the schools. I understand why it's taking so long to see change because it's such a systemic thing. And so, I like to describe it as when rowing a boat, it's super easy to make change. I can just like I can just like change this oar, I can just paddle this way and my boat moves. But if I'm on a huge ocean liner, I've got to inform the entire team to get the ship to move just a little bit to the right. And that's what we're thinking about when we're thinking about a school system. So it does take thinking about it that way, it allows me to kind of give schools a little grace and then just go, okay, they're not there yet. Like, but my daughter's not going to be in it while you're struggling.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, and we've talked about your children's
Mhm.
neurodivergence, but when was it when you discovered your own neurodivergence?
So I think growing up, I never felt like I fit. And I described this with someone the other day. I was saying that I thought something was off, but I didn't know what it was. Like I thought I was adopted. I thought I must have been born to the wrong family. Maybe I was accidentally switched at birth. Like I didn't know what it was, but I just didn't feel like I fit and I couldn't describe it. And in school, I thought I was somehow broken. Like I was like that straight A student, didn't really have to try very hard to get straight A's. But I also really struggled to focus. I didn't read a book until I was a junior in college, and I still got straight A's and a 4.5 GPA. Like I just, um, I I chewed on everything. I was really emotional. I fidgeted with all sorts of things. And it wasn't until I was learning about my son that I started learning about my own sensory preferences and some of the things that I do that are sensory related. And I would say, oh, if I grew up today as a kid, I'd probably be diagnosed as ADHD. And that's how it started, was me saying that over and over again. And then everyone around me going, oh no, Dayna, you are definitely ADHD. And then me finally just saying, wait a second, I need to just own this. Like, I need to accept that this is who I am. It's not, oh, if I was a kid today, I'd be diagnosed. Like, even knowing as an adult is extremely helpful. And so that was actually like just in the last couple of years that I started owning my own neurodivergence and saying, yeah, I am twice exceptional, if you want to call it that. But like, I just think I'm neurodivergent. I think most neurodivergent people are twice exceptional. That's a word that gets used here. I don't know if it's popular there, that 2E framing. But, I definitely had these highlight moments, and then just the disparity between the two. Figured, like, I thought it was me that was failing everything. I couldn't figure out what was wrong.
Which of course is, very, very common story.
100%.
Yeah. So what was it that made you start your parenting group and the Calm the Chaos workshops?
So I started the blog 10 years ago, that day that my son got kicked out. Not the exact day, but right around there, when I decided to bring my son home. I looked online and was like, okay, how do I homeschool him? How do I help him? How do I understand him? That summer, I read The Out of Sync Child, which was the first book I had read on any sort of neurodivergence. And it wasn't even called that at the time. It was about sensory processing disorder. And but it was the first thing I had heard that really made sense as to how he was interpreting the world and soaking up information and kind of going through the world. And that made all the difference for me in helping him. But when I was looking online, there was nothing out there that helped me understand him when it came to like blogs or resources, and everything looked pretty and perfect and everyone had it figured out. It was like this Pinterest perfect type of society. And so I just decided I was going to just share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's when it started. And so I didn't see myself as an expert in parenting. I still, I think I'm an expert in understanding humans. I think I'm really good at being a bridge for people and helping bridge information that is really complex into something that they can understand. I think that's what I'm an expert in. And in doing so, I've been able to craft a parenting style that works with my child and for my own family. And so I started sharing that with other people. People wanted to know more about it. And I didn't actually start Calm the Chaos until 2018. So 5 years into this journey is when I finally started sharing, okay, this is what we've done. This is what I've learned. Here's a framework you can follow and craft your own parenting style instead of, oh, follow all the steps I did and then magically everything will be perfect. Because I still don't believe that that's how it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So, do you think that being neurodivergent lets you put a different spin on things?
100%. I think me being neurodivergent and also living as that parent of not understanding my kid allows me to kind of bridge both worlds. I've got one foot in the neurodivergent world and I've got one foot in the mainstream world. Parents who don't quite understand where the behavior is coming from, what's happening, why it's happening. And then I'm getting information. I'm learning from autistic adults. I'm learning from ADHD adults. I'm learning all of these things that they wish their parents had known growing up. And so I'm able to bridge those two worlds instead of adding to the divide that's already there. And so one of the things that I think that I feel like I'm an expert in is when people start talking to me about their kid, I feel like I am their kid in so many ways. And while I'm not autistic, they'll say things, but I just have that empathy and understanding for the kid in such a deep, compassionate way that I'm able to share a story about my own life and then say, would you say I'm unsuccessful? And they're like, no, of course not. I'm like, okay, well, I did XYZ when I was a kid. And I'm able to share a different light on what I was thinking, what I was feeling, how I was going through that moment. And it helps them be able to take that leap or make that jump.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Tell us a bit about the book then, and what made you, what inspired you to write it?
Yeah. So with Calm the Chaos, the book, it is kind of my culmination of 10 years of doing this work, both online, in person. And it's what I discovered, along the way is that there is no one size fits all solution. And that a lot of information out there has you believing that you are either doing it wrong or your kid is broken. And people will say all the time, well, there's no handbook for that, or there's no manual for parenting a neurodivergent kid. And I'm so glad we can say that there are many of them now out there that help us understand our kids. But a lot of the books out there are about understanding our kids and understanding the concepts. But then when you go to implement the concepts in your own life, there's this big gap between knowing and doing. And so over the last 5 years, I have iterated and reiterated the Calm the Chaos framework and roadmap with parents all around the world. And I've seen that it works. I mean, it works, it works, it works. Like, I truly believe that it works because it's not about saying, do this one thing and that's it. It's about saying, here's a framework. There are these 4 elements that you want to think about when you're going through these different stages. And here's the stages. And you're going to cycle through these stages for the rest of your life with your kid. But if you can take these on as habits that you apply to your life, you and your kids' relationship will transform. And I'm sitting in a room. We talked about how this room is kind of my like sacred place. And it's like a little corner. It's away from everything. And I can't change the camera, but my wall is full of like real families, like little pictures like this of people who've gone through the framework and they've radically changed their life, their kids' life, their family's life by implementing it. And I just knew that there needed to be a more accessible way to get this to more people. And so that's what led me to put it all in the book.
Hmm. And how did your own family, not just the family in your house, but your extended family, how did they kind of react to all of this going on?
So my mom is no longer with me, and so I didn't get a chance to see what she would have thought, but she was my biggest fan when we were doing the blog. And at first it was really hard for her when I would write about, breaking cycles or changing things. And she would say, well, I did it this way and I wasn't that bad of a parent. And I would say, Mom, this isn't about you. Like, this is just a new awareness I have and something that I am noticing makes a difference and I want to share with other people. Um, and so it took a while for her to not take it so personal when things would happen, where I'd share things. But it came to the point, my older brother is bipolar and really has struggled his entire life. He's about to be, he's 49. So he's creeping up on 50 and he's still I believe homeless or crowd surfs or couch surfs or whatever. And he has pretty much been estranged from anyone that's ever tried to help him or love him. And it goes back to that whole, like, I wanted my son when I brought him home, I didn't care about the academics. I didn't care about any of that. What I wanted is him to not hate himself for not fitting in. And I didn't want him to hate the world for not understanding him because I could see that in my brother. My brother pushed everyone away because he blamed everyone. And then I also saw what it was like when I blamed myself and I put that pain inward and that destruction inward and tried to destroy myself. And so I really believe that if we can help kids understand who they are, why they tick, why they do what they do, help them have empathy and grace for themselves, then it literally will change the world. And so I've had the beautiful pleasure of having my mom before she passed, and then my dad just say, I wish this was around when we were raising your brother. Like this is really helpful. Thank you for doing this for people. And that probably is like one of the ultimate compliments. And then just the other day we were at a store and my son said to me, he picked up a sticker and it said something like, be the type of woman that sees another woman with a broken crown and fixes it without telling the world it's broken. And he picked up the sticker and he said, Mom, I think this is your sticker. This is what you do. And I just was like, okay, that is like the ultimate compliment right there. Of being able, like, that's what I hope to do, is let everybody see that they're not broken. There's nothing wrong with them. They're exactly who they're meant to be. And when we learn about who we are and what our struggles are, we can build systems around that, that support us. And that's what I do with the families that I work with. And I try to help them see with their kids as well.
And I know you've got quite a big community
Hmm.
online.
Hmm.
What are some of the most wacky situations that you've had to unpick
Oh
in
my
that
gosh.
community?
You name it. Gosh, I mean, I'm looking at my wall right now. You've got your typical toddler behaviors of, where they're doing whatever they want. They're saying no to everything. They're not taking a bath. They're not showering. You've got a lot of those typical behaviors. You got teenagers who won't get off their electronics, who are experimenting. I see this a lot actually with teenagers more and more. They're self-medicating in some way. So they're experimenting with drugs, they're experimenting with alcohol, they're taking the parents' car out for a joyride. They're indulging in very risky behavior. And a lot of times these kids don't yet have a diagnosis, and they don't quite know why they're doing what they're doing. So I'm seeing that more and more with the crowd that you might call neurotypical, but most likely they're not if they're struggling in that much. Um, I've seen, parents in burnout. I've seen kids in burnout. We've dealt with like siblings who are like fighting to the extreme where one is not safe. One now has like, trauma built up because of the unsafe situations they've been in. I had a kindergarten kid whose dad was ready to send him off to like a private school, like a military type school, because he was behaving so poorly in school. And those are some of like the mainstream struggles. And then we've also worked through, I've got the ones who do have diagnoses, and I'm seeing a lot more of like the PDA subtype. And my kid just pretends like they're a cat when they're upset, and things like that. And so, we're starting to see some different challenges. It's helping a parent today. And I don't think wacky is the right description, right? But like I saw a parent today on our coaching call was asking about resentment towards her child. And I think a lot of times parents are afraid to ask questions because from certain communities, you're then a bad parent because you should love the kid you have. And we aren't taught naturally how to just accept the world we've been given. And that takes coaching, that takes a community of people that get you, that takes a lot of time and a lot of grace for yourself. And so this parent is a parent of a 15-year-old autistic boy who has unreliable speech patterns. And so he does have some speech, but for the most part, he's not using spoken word to communicate. And so we had to kind of unravel like acknowledge like this resentment is normal. And this resentment, like, we don't want you to hold on to this resentment, obviously, but like it's a very normal feeling. Feel it, like accept it. And now let's figure out where it's coming from. There's a deep belief there, right? What is the deep belief? My kid by 15 should be able to do these things. We shouldn't be dealing with throwing and kicking at 15. We shouldn't have holes in the wall by 15. I can't have anything nice, Why are we still dealing with these things, right? Whatever that inner like thoughts and beliefs, that's the stuff we got to pull up. We got to work on it, massage it. And then we've got to say, okay, but what do we really think is under the surface here with our kiddo? And for her son, right, he's hitting puberty. He is wanting to communicate more. And obviously, he's showing clear signs he does not have ways to communicate where others can understand him. And so I asked about different communication methods, and she said, no, we've never tried any of those. I'm like, he's 15. Like, let's maybe explore some different ways that he can communicate, because at 15, you want to be independent. So it doesn't matter what body you're in or what skills you have or what you're doing, you're still a 15-year-old kid who's wanting to have their own autonomy and to have their own voice. And so those are some of the things that we just worked through today, even.
Okay. Going back to the cat, may pretend to be a cat is actually on our checklist of
Yeah.
in an internal profile of autism. That's how common it is.
Yeah, I've learned that more recently as I've been talking with more and more autistic adults and with more resources, just how common it is to use that pretend play when stressed or when, trying to regulate themselves. It's their like equalizing behavior of it's so much easier for me to be a robot or a car or a cat or a dog or a dinosaur than to answer your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
How do you support the parents who are, perhaps at the very beginning of the journey or not at the beginning, but haven't actually made the effort to learn more about neurodivergence? How do you handle that?
So I think that's one of my gifts, is that I do have that compassion and understanding of everyone does what they do for a reason, and everyone's doing the best they can with what they've been given. And even if they've had access to more information, they haven't been in a place to access it themselves. And so I just come from a place of compassion, and I try to meet parents where they're at and where they're currently what they're currently dealing with. So at first I listen, I hold space, I give them that space and that availability. We actually have a system set up inside of our community, so that our community is not a place of complaining or just like berating our kids or anything like that. But when we're in those deep dark, like I'm having a moment, we do need a place to just kind of like word vomit it out. Otherwise, we hold it all in and we don't actually move forward. And so we do have a system, and I talk about it in the book. It's called Set a Timer, where people will just post set a timer. And then one person in the community will say, well, how bad is it? And the other person will say, oh, it's an 8. And they'll say, okay, I'm going to give you 7 minutes and 27 seconds, some random time. And then the person can just like word vomit in the comments of that one post, and only one person is there saying, I'm holding space, I'm here for you, I hear you. And they're not responding to any of sometimes filth that's coming out of the person's mouth because they're in that dysregulated state. And at the end, they walk them through a tiny next step. And, sometimes that's taking a breath. Sometimes that's walking outside, getting the sun. Sometimes that's taking a drink of water. And then typically after that tiny next step is, okay, what are you going to do now? Oh, I'm going to go and ask a question. I'm going to go watch a video. I'm going to go learn something. I'm going to like look at my son's behavior different, whatever that is. But it allows them to kind of get out all of that muck so that they can be open to new ideas. And then so that's one thing that it does. It protects them and gives them the space, but it also protects the group, because my group knows to just scroll over set a timer post and not open them up and see the comments, because unless they want to like support that person, but if they're not in the headspace, if they are at a place where they're much further down the acceptance trail, it's going to be a lot harder to hear someone say, my kid's just a brat, I resent them, why is he like this, And we have neurodivergent adults, we have PDAers, we have ADHDers, and so it can be really triggering to hear a parent talk like that about the kid. And so they just know, oh, those are posts where they're just doing their thing and I'm not going to read it. So it keeps our group really safe for everyone. And so I have to know that that is where they're going to start. And my goal is to move them slowly. And I start getting a little more heavy handed, like after they've been with us for a few weeks or 6 weeks and they start asking the same things over and over again, or I notice that they just have these really high expectations for their kids over and over and over and over again. That's when I'm like, okay, so I've noticed that all of your questions have this similar theme. And then we kind of dig into that. And a lot of times that will do it. That'll kind of shake them out of it. If the course itself or the materials itself haven't done it, a lot of times that is the thing that will kind of either shake them out or they run away. And then, what's great is that as we've got people who've been in our world for the last 6 years. And so there's so many great mentors and great peers to help parents make those swaps faster. And I'm seeing those swaps happen in weeks instead of years now.
Which is great, obviously.
Yeah.
What was my one? We're nearly at the end of my questions, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the best things that have come out of your parenting programs and your workshops?
Oh my goodness.
For you and maybe for your team and maybe for the members.
Yeah. All the things. I mean, I know that sounds really silly, but I just ran a retreat where some of the parents came. I have a high level program where it doesn't just focus on using the framework for your kid, but it also focuses on yourself. So how you can rediscover who you are, fall in love with yourself again, and really accept yourself for who you are. And then how you can be a fierce advocate for yourself and your family. And then moving into creating a life by your design, not by the world standards. And so in this program, we just had a retreat. We had people from all over the world come in. We had about 15 people come to the room. And I feel like just a picture of the room is such a good picture of what has come from our program. So in the room, if you were to walk in, we had a U-shaped room with like me speaking in the front, people at the tables. And then we had one person, she's an autistic adult who's a PDA profile, and she had created this whole pillow fort inside the U. And that's where she did her work the entire weekend. And then we had another person who, anytime they were feeling it all in their body, they would just climb under the table and then like poke their head out from the tablecloth and just listen that way. We would have people that would just get up and go to the back of the room and do stretches or stim or pace the room. We would have someone who'd get up and dance around the room while talking, while like the program was going. And that is the type of environment we want our kids to realize that they can grow up in, that there are rooms that are being created like that where people feel safe to fully be themselves. And my daughter walked in towards the end and decided to stick with us for half a day. And she, just stood up, walked around the room, did her dancing, did her movements, then went back down, like sat down, did some drawing and painting. And I think what I've seen the most is kids being able to see what it's like to own their body, to love who they are, to understand why they do what they do, and then be able to advocate for it in such a way that others will listen, even if the other people don't quite understand why they're doing it and aren't quite at the place where they are. So we've had kids who become our parents will go to a parent teacher conference and the teacher will say, I got to tell you about something that just happened. Your kid was in the corner and they had like all these kids' chairs pulled up around them. And I don't know what you're doing with your kid, but they were finding out everybody's concerns about the classroom and why learning was hard and why they were struggling. And then they then brought those concerns to, and solutions that they had come up with to me so that we could change the classroom so everyone could be successful. She's like, I don't know many 10-year-olds that do that.
One of the, maybe not the most common, but one of the common questions that we get asked in our Facebook group is, how do you accommodate different kind of flavors of neurodivergency in the same family or in the same group, for example? So
Mm-hmm.
let's say you've got, one person who regulates by making a noise, and you've got another person who absolutely can't stand that noise.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
both have their own needs, they both have their own, ways of advocating, but that causes conflict. How do
Yeah.
you advise people to deal with that?
So, one, we talk about building that safety and relationship first, because if that's not built, then it's going to be hard to get the other person to say, "Oh, I see that, you need noise and I need quiet." So, in the book, we talk about these stages, and instead of starting with like, "Hey, let's all work together and let's, let everybody be accommodated," we start with, "How do we ride the storm when?" Two people are doing, the thing they need to do to regulate, and it's going against each other. And then we end up in this big explosion. How do we ride through that? How do we get through that? So I just want to put that out there first, and assume that you've been through all those stages and you have a beautiful relationship where your kids feel trusted. They feel like they have autonomy and they feel like they have that voice. And so what that might sound like is, so I've noticed that when you get really excited, you like to stim by making noises. And when your sister gets really excited, she likes to be in a quiet space. And sometimes we're excited in the same place and both of you bother each other. And so I've been wondering if maybe we could, when you're excited, we have a place where you stim that is away from your sister. That way you can make all the noises you want and your sister can still have all the quiet she wants. And then you go to the sister and you're like, and I'm wondering if maybe you could have something that you put on your ears or something that you could do that helps you get that quiet, or you could walk away. In the context of like our program, like, or in a classroom, you don't want them to miss maybe what we're working on, and you want them to feel included. And so that's what I was saying is, like, after COVID, when we all went virtual, we all now know how to use Zoom. And so if it's just easily set up, so for our program, it was set up on Zoom already. So if someone was struggling, I set it up right at the beginning, or if someone needed to STEM, they could step out in the hall, they could take a computer with them and still listen and participate in the chat. But that way, the people in the room could still hear what was going on. So we just set up kind of these like quote unquote ground rules, but they were ground rules that set up the space for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. So I think my last question for you is, what's next?
Oh, it's a good question. Right now, I'm just kind of digging into supporting our members and supporting anyone that comes into our world. And yeah, I'm just kind of I'm in kind of a learning creative phase and just kind of listening to the world around me and what people are needing. So I don't have any big, huge plans. I'd love to speak more. I'd love to be on stage and talking more. And I'd love to be doing more and more presentations like this. So right now, that's just like the small thing I'm doing. But as far as um, you know, writing another book or doing any of those things, I think that's a little ways off.
Okay. And what kind of things are you learning? What are you into at the moment?
Okay, so I just started a course today on hand lettering. So if you've seen my book, it has a lot of doodles and things like that in it. And lately I've been doing art journaling, which is you just open up your page and you start watercoloring or acrylic painting, instead of having to know what words you want to put down, but words go with it. And I've noticed that I don't like the way the words look when I write them or paint them. And so I'm like, ooh, I want to learn how to make my letters look really pretty. And so I've been diving into art journaling, diving into hand lettering. And then I've just been like soaking up books that people send me. And so that is also, I've just been it's been a long time because when my kid was young, that's all I did was learn, 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 learn. And there's been so many advances in the neurodivergent space and in what we know about the brain, the body, the nervous system, that I'm just kind of diving in and making sure that I have the language that I need and that I can understand where people are coming from and I can help support them.
I'll have to send you my book.
Yeah, I'll
So,
take it. I'll love it.
okay. All right. So now we're going to open up to questions from the audience. So if you've got a question that you would like to ask Dayna, then pop it in the chat, and I will ask it to her. That's not a well-formulated sentence, but never mind.
I understood it.
We don't worry about things like that.
We were talking about word retrieval before we came on, because sometimes
Yeah.
word retrieval.
Actually, I have a question.
Okay.
What are some of the most common things that are asked in your community? I wonder
Ooh.
whether they are the same as being asked.
Because we meet parents where they are, and a lot of times parents are coming to us without this understanding of neurodivergence, without an understanding of, sometimes without even the understanding of, the brain body response or the nervous system responses or sensory system. Sometimes they are not aware of any of those things, because let's be honest, like, unless you have a child who, and except for like the last 3 years, I feel like it's really changed in the last 3 years. But before the last 3 years, unless you had a child who had a diagnosis, you didn't know about any of that stuff. Like, none of that was really shared with you, unless you were like a trauma-informed counselor, or, you were a school teacher that specialized in learning about those things. So I meet a lot of parents who just ask, how do I deal with X, Y, Z? Right? It doesn't matter what it is, but how do you deal with, what do I do? What do I say? So those are some of the like most common questions I get. What do I do if my kids are fighting? What do I do if my partner's adding to the chaos? What do I do if my kid refuses to get off electronics? What do I do if I am calm and quiet and they still kick me? What do I say when? What do I do when? Those are probably the top questions I get. Some of the more evolved questions that I've started getting is, how do you support your kid? Like, I understand my kid. I know my kid. I get where this is coming from, but how do I support my kid's needs when I myself are not getting my basic needs met? Right. So once they become more aware, they're like, okay, this is great and all, but how do we do this? How do we actually like walk through the fire?
And that can, of course, be particularly difficult for neurodivergent parents who
100%.
may, as we talked about before, may have completely different regulation needs to their
Yes.
children.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah, it's tough. But we got a question from Liz, who says, any advice with schools and how to make sure my child's needs are being met? The school want my child to communicate her own needs herself, but I worry she isn't able. They seem to dislike me advocating for them.
Mm. I'd be curious the age. And then, I find that giving them alternative ways to learn about, she's 10. Okay. Um, giving resources to schools is sometimes easier than saying my child needs this or my child should have this. Sometimes they're a little more receptive, not always. Also asking information from them, like, can you tell me what you saw today? Can you tell me what you noticed today? And they can start telling you things. You can say, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. And when that happens at home, this is what works really well. That also can be really helpful when we think of the school, even if they are not our allies, even if they are on the opposite page of us. When we think of them as a part of the team and we can see where they're coming from, what their hopes are, what they're trying to do, and we can give them the benefit of the doubt, sometimes it does soften that blow a little bit. And it's hard though, when we're 10 and our kid's neurodivergent, our kid is ADHD or autistic, doesn't have communication skills, if that's the case, or self-regulation skills yet. Or the self-awareness of why they're doing what they're doing or what their needs are. We become like that, I need to be protecting my kid, right? Like we become that protective bear, and that scares off the school. So I think any way that we can see them as a friend instead of an enemy is helpful first. And then second would be helping them kind of get the same understanding that you have, because you've been on this journey for the last 10 years with your kid, and the teachers are stressed, they're overworked, they're like given so much information they're supposed to learn about. And now there's one more thing you're giving them. And so it's like, hey, I'd love to make this easier for you. How can I help? What can I do to support you? But then that's also assuming you have the capacity to do that. So that's my short answer, but obviously there's a long, long answer by knowing more about you.
Yeah. And I'd say, Liz, you could also send them our white paper, which is available as a free download on our website, called Autism Girls and Keeping It All Inside. And in there, there is a whole section on alexithymia. If she is having difficulty talking about her feelings or what's wrong, it's very possible that she's alexithymic. Over half of autistic people are alexithymic, so there's a good chance of it. And most school staff will not even have heard of the word alexithymia, let alone understand it. So getting them to understand that, and for you as well, if you don't really know much about alexithymia at the moment, getting to understand that is really important if your child is alexithymic. And perhaps I should have explained what alexithymia is, in case anyone here doesn't know. So
I've never heard
alexithymia.
that term. I've
Oh,
never heard that
haven't
term,
you?
but no, but it like is a light bulb for me. My son it wasn't until he was like 11 and a half that I told you he was highly verbal, high IQ. But he didn't have any words for feelings, emotions, or anything like that, especially when they pertain to himself. He
Yeah,
had
I mean, now
no
we
vocabulary for
know
it.
it's the
Yeah.
default. Now we understand, research is showing, and I'm pretty sure that research will be showing that it's more and more important, and it's actually more than half of autistic people who are alexithymic.
Wow.
But basically it's a difficulty or an impossibility of identifying and expressing emotions. And it goes further than that. But that's basically what it is. And so when somebody says to you, which, let's face it, we do it all the time, we say, "How are you? How do you feel about that?" That's an impossible question
Yes.
for
Yes.
her to answer if she's alexithymic. It's absolutely impossible. So she will make something up. She will fawn. If she's a masker at school, she will fawn and she will tell you what she thinks you want to hear. But of course, that's not helping her, and it's not helping the school understand what's wrong and, or what's upsetting her, and how they can make things better. So getting them to understand alexithymia is a good step if that's something that she struggles with.
Yeah, I love that. And then that just made me think also, like in the book, I talk about something called a behavior spiral. And the idea is that you take whatever the epicenter, I call it the epicenter, but like the moment of challenge, and you spiral out what's going on with the kid, with the adult, with the environment, and everything that's adding to that big explosion. And you're looking for like a tipping point. And so even if your kid can't describe feelings, emotions, a lot of times they might be able to say, you may even notice, right? At home, you're probably already noticing a lot of the things that are happening on that spiral, and you're stopping it from getting to a point of no return already. But the school doesn't know how to notice all of those nuances, that there was a loud noise, that there was a fire alarm in the morning, that the schedule changed and we had a new teacher come into the classroom, that she had itchy pants on today and didn't really realize it when she put them on in the morning. All these things that are like adding up to, or like that the teacher asked her something and she thought that she was in trouble, right? So all these things adding up. And when it becomes moments or events, it becomes easier for our kids to say, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, instead of I felt this and then I got mad and then I did, and so just to give you a little bit of like hope my 18-year-old, by the end, he was not a masker in any way. He like let it all out everywhere. And so by the time he graduated high school, he could do those spirals, and to the point where near the end of school, he he had just gotten in trouble for not paying attention in one of his classes, and his grades were slipping, and it was because it was boring. He didn't have any interest in it, and the teacher had no connection with him. And so he decided he was gonna really try to focus. But then they put him with a kid who was sleeping, right? And so he was like, I don't know, like, you got to pay attention. And so he joked with the kid and said, hey buddy, like, you got to pay attention. We got to do this work together. And the kid was like, I'm sleeping. Leave me alone. And we are in an inner city. So this kid was a little rough around the edges. And my son was like, well, I just got to pop you on the head if to wake you up. And he was joking. And the kid said, you pop me on the head, see what happens. And so my kid popped him in the head to see what would happen, because the kid told him, pop me in the head and see what happens. And so my kid popped him in the head to see what happens, just gently. And the kid got up and just punched him in the face. And my son picked up his backpack, picked up his computer, and just walked out the door and went to the principal's office and sat down. And she was like, Elijah, why are you here? You're going to get called. Something just happened. And so she was like, okay, spell out what just happened. And he spiraled out exactly what happened the way I was able to tell you just now. And it's such a skill. It's such a skill to be able to teach our kids that, because they can find the point of like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to walk away because this is just going to get far worse if I just keep engaging. And the thing he said to the principal was, I misread the room. I just misread the room. It was like, oh, buddy. So
Yeah, great for
yeah,
him recognizing it as well.
yeah, yeah. But
Although
he's
not
18.
great, not great to get punched, obviously.
Not great to be punched. He was, yeah, not great to be punched. But he was trying to do the thing they asked him to do, right? Which was pay attention and
Yeah.
and participate. And he was given an impossible situation in his case, he thought, so yeah. So, but it does help when we can give our kids those tools. Did we freeze
Another,
up?
another good tool, if your child is alexithymic.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry?
I didn't know if
Another
we froze.
good tool if your child is alexithymic is to start kind of narrating what's
Mm-hmm.
happening
Oh,
as well. That
100%.
can really help. So certain situation, yeah, oh, I've got this letter. It's really upset. I'm really upset now. This letter is being said. Then your start is that they may very well only recognize early developmental like anger, fear, happy, sad, and may have really difficulty recognizing other emotions. Starting to rate your emotions, what you, and giving them the context of what the situation is, can really help them to end up building up a big picture. Right. Do we have any more questions? Because we are almost at the end of time. But I can't see any more questions in the chat. If you've got a question, feel free to pop it in there really, really, really quick. But otherwise, we will finish up and I will give you back 5 minutes of your life, which is always nice. Right, I don't think we've got any more questions for me. So
Okay.
in that case, I am going to finish up. Thank you so much, Dayna, for coming tonight and for giving us your wisdom. I'll send you a book. And thanks everybody else for coming. It has been really good and it's been really interesting.
Yeah. Thank you so
Okay.
much for having me.
You're very welcome. Okay. Good night or good afternoon.
Yeah. Bye.